When you think modern classics, there's a very good chance that you're thinking about a Triumph. And in the last few years, Triumph has really done a very good job of democratizing modern engineering with classic retro styling with the TR400 series engine bikes like the Speed 400 and the Scrambler 400. And today what we have here is the fourth installment on the TR400 platform. Say hello to the Thruxton 400, and in this video I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know about this motorcycle, because as you can very clearly see, there is a lot to unpack. But before I tell you everything, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed this content, share it with like-minded enthusiasts, and smash that bell icon to stay notified for all of our video drops. I feel it's important that we address what's most important on this bike, and that's its styling, because this after all looks like a proper Thruxton, and Triumph has achieved that by a few key design changes. Obviously starting with the front end with the small fairing, this nice tall windscreen that integrates around the round headlight very nicely in my opinion. And if you look closer over here, there's like a small wing sort of design, looks very nice in my opinion. Now when I first saw the teaser images, I wasn't very convinced with the proportions of this motorcycle, but seeing it in the flesh, riding it around for a little time, it's really started to grow on me a lot, and I'm quite liking how this motorcycle looks. Now like I said, you have this nice fairing that comes all the way up to the tank, which as you can very clearly see has been reprofiled to enable a better tucked riding position. I'll get to the riding position and all in a bit, but coming to the design of the tank, as you can see, there's this new beveled chambered panel over here along with the cutouts for the forks, so when you get full lock, there is that. Up top you have clip-on handlebars now and bar and mirrors. This is the standard fitment as to how you will get the bike if you were to buy one. At the center of it all is still the same semi-digital, semi-analog instrument cluster with the big speedometer and the tachometer and all other information in the digital cluster. Then moving behind, you have this panel over here which says Thruxton 400, because that's what the bike is called. I'm not too fond of the font, but that again is a nitpick. It's not really something that is wrong with the design of the motorcycle. You still have this same brushed stainless steel finish for the exhaust muffler. Then moving behind, you have a new seat. It's a little wider, it's been reprofiled, it's sculpted better so that you can interact with the motorcycle in the manner that is meant to be. It's supportive for that. And you move behind, and this is actually a single piece double seater, but because this is the Thruxton, it's a cafe racer, you get this nice cowl which you can remove and option as a double seater if you want to take someone two up. Then moving further behind, you have this grab rail over here with a new tail light. Now in the entire grand scheme of things, this bike looks very beautiful, but if there's one thing I had to complain about is the design and the shape of the tail light. I would have much preferred if Triumph stuck with the tail light from the Speed 400 and the Scrambler 400, but instead they have opted for something that looks like it belongs on a more modern looking motorcycle, not here. Now in terms of the wheel design and everything, all of that is very similar to the Speed 400, but what you do get are new colors. This is a red, lava red color, then you have a yellow metallic color, then you also have a white with black and blue accents, and you have a full black colorway. All the colors look very nice, but I personally, if I were to put my money down on one, I'd get the black colorway. Moving back to the tank for a minute, there's another new element over here, which is the fuel filler cap. Now Triumph is calling this the Monza fuel filler cap. It looks properly retro. It has this flap that opens up. It's finished in a brushed aluminum sort of finish, but I feel the quality could have been a little better. Design wise, it looks great. It goes very well with the grand scheme of things, but I just feel like the execution, the quality could have been a little better. All in all, the design of this motorcycle is spot on. Triumph have really nailed the Thruxton brief. This is a properly handsome looking motorcycle. What do you think about it? Let us know in the comment section down below. Now let's talk about the ride and handling of this new Thruxton 400, because Triumph has done a lot of work to make this feel like a very different motorcycle when it comes to the ride and handling, and that starts with the front end. As you can very clearly see, the flat tall handlebar has been done away with, and we now have clip-on handlebars which are roughly 40 millimeters closer in and 240 millimeters shorter in the sense that it's below the triple tree now, so that gives you that nice aggressive hunched over position. And along with that, the foot pegs also have gotten a little taller and a little more rear set. So let me quickly sit and demonstrate what that looks like. The seat height is more or less the same, but it does feel like a different motorcycle to sit on because of the ergonomic changes. The foot pegs, as you can see, are a little rear set, and the reprofiled seat and the tank aid in the better aggressive riding stance, and that is also down to the handlebar setup. Now this feels very nice. It's not as aggressive as say something like a Yamaha R15 or something. It's a nice in between a naked bike and a proper super sport bike. That's exactly what a cafe racer should feel like any which ways. So let me quickly get off and continue telling you about what's different on this motorcycle. Now the suspension, the main suspension components are very similar to that of the Speed 400, but what Triumph tells us is that it has revised spring rates, and the suspension travel is also 10 millimeters more. So you have 140 millimeters of travel at the front instead of the 130 that you get on the Triumph Speed 400, the 2025 model, and you have 130 millimeters of travel at the rear instead of the 120 millimeters of travel that you get on the 2025 Speed 400. Now along with that, the rake angle has been changed as well. You now have a 24.5 degree rake angle, which is around 0.6 degrees less, rather sharper than that on the Speed 400. Now because of that, the wheelbase has reduced by 10 millimeters as well, and what this all means to you and me is that this is a sharper bike. Now the Speed 400 was already a nice and a sharp and a playful motorcycle, but it wasn't properly committed, say something like the Duke 390. This on the other hand, it feels more sharp, it feels more aggressive. That's also because you're putting a lot more weight down on the front with the way you're sitting, plus with the sharper rake as well. It turns in a little quicker, it feels a little more lively through the corners. You can flick it around very easily, and once you get used to the riding position, this is a whole lot of fun in the corners. Heck, I'd even go as far as saying that I would actually like to do a few track days with this motorcycle as well. Now the rest of the cycle parts are more or less unchanged, but one small change which is more visual than functional is the brake reservoir. You have this now brake reservoir tub sort of thing instead of the box type brake reservoir that you find on the Speed 400. This is been made so that you have proper clearance when you're turning the handlebar from lock to lock. So it not only looks great, but it has also been done functionally to avoid it from getting caught in the panels. But the braking hardware itself remains unchanged. So you get a 300mm disc at the front, you get sintered brake pads like the Speed 400, you also get steel braided brake lines. The braking setup at the rear also stays unchanged. In terms of tires, you get Apollo Alpha H1s. You also have the option of MRFs, but if you're getting this bike, get the Apollos and call it a day, because these are exceptional tires. They're very neutral in the way they steer. They're not too quick, they're not too dull either. They have a good amount of grip in the wet and the dry. So all in all, I feel like this is the better tire setup of the two that are available if you were to buy the Thruxton 400. Now, in terms of ride quality, this does feel plush like the Speed 400, and that extra travel not only allows you to go over bumps and rocks and undulations with a lot of confidence that you know it won't ground out, but it's also been very plush in the way that it deals with it. Almost too plush to an extent where you might want a slightly stiffer setup with the sportier intent that this bike has. But I feel in the grand scheme of things, considering that you'll be leaving with the bike in a city in India where the roads are not that great, this plush setup works very, very well. Braking as well, strong, sharp with enough feedback. I did feel a smidge of brake fade, but then again, that could just be a new bike issue. It just needs to be run in properly. So I will reserve my judgment on the brake fade once I test the bike more thoroughly for a longer duration. But as it stands, the ride and handling, it does feel very different from the Speed 400 in the sense that this feels more committed to a sporty riding intent, and that's exactly how it should be, considering that this is a Thruxton after all. Now, all of the changes that the bike receives in terms of the cosmetic updates, the fairing and all of that, and this cowling with the seat, all of that does translate to a bit of a weight penalty, because this does weigh 183 kilos fully fueled versus 179 on the Speed 400. But the bike also does make more power with the updated engine tune, which we will get to in a minute. So the weight has gone up to 183 kilos. Now, Thruxtons are meant to be the sportiest of the modern classic lot from Triumph stables, and to that end, Triumph have done a good job of not just slapping in the engine from the Speed 400 as is. They have done some crucial work to the engine to make it feel that much more sporty, to make it feel that much more lively, to go with the newfound handling traits that this motorcycle has, courtesy of all the changes to the chassis and the revised ergonomics. So to that end, Triumph have done a bunch of changes to the engine with the camshaft and with a bunch of other internals to increase the redline by 1000 RPM. And what that means, along with the updated internals, is that this makes more power. This is the most powerful 400 TR engine in the range. It's more powerful than the Speed, more powerful than the Scrambler, and it has different sprocketting as well. So let's quickly get into that. Now, in terms of power, this makes 41.5 bhp instead of 39.5 that the Speed 400 makes. This also makes all of that power 1000 RPM later at 9000 RPM on this instead of 8000 RPM on this Speed 400. Now, in terms of torque, this makes the same 37.5 Newton meters off it, but unlike the Speed 400, which makes peak torque at 6500 RPM, this makes it at 7500 RPM. So essentially what that translates to is a much more lively top end of the motorcycle, but Triumph has also been smart about it and not taken away too much from the low and the mid range of the motorcycle. Though second gear on the Speed 400 is equivalent to third gear of this, but this still has a lot of low and mid range torque that you're not constantly messing around with the gearbox, which remains to be the same slick 6-speed unit with the same gear ratios. But like I said earlier, the sprocketing is different. This has a 2-tooth smaller rear sprocket, so this has a 43-tooth rear sprocket and the same 15-tooth front sprocket. So that again translates to a motorcycle that is much happier at higher revs in terms of delivering power. It doesn't just quickly snap to the red line and doesn't have much to give. This does actually have a lot of potential and performance in the top end without sacrificing that low end and mid range that this engine is known and loved for. Now, in terms of vibrations, this is not something that Triumph has completely addressed just yet. There's still a fair bit of vibrations like there are on the Speed 400, and that's very apparent from 6,500-7,000 RPM, and it becomes a lot more apparent at around 8,000 RPM. So if you plan to stay at those RPMs, I don't suggest that you do, because it does get quite buzzy. But that being said, speeds like 100 kmph at 6th gear is very comfortable. There are barely any wipes to speak of. You can sit there all day long. You can do maybe even a little more, and the suspension, the chassis, everything will cope with our roads very well at those speeds. So you're not really sacrificing much by way of cruising ability either, just because this makes more power higher up in the rev range. So Triumph have struck that balance very, very well. If they were to sort out the vibrations, this would be an absolute gem of a motor in my opinion. Now, in terms of speeds, Triumph claims that this is faster to 100 by nearly a second, with its claimed 0 to 100 time at 6.7 seconds versus 7.7 on the Speed 400, and the top speed has also gone up from 148 kilometers per hour on the Speed 400 to 161 kilometers per hour on this Thruxton 400. Now, in terms of the throttle response and the ride-by-wire calibration, all of that has also been updated to deal with that extra power and the extra 1000 revs to play with. You have the same electronics by way of a dual-channel ABS setup and a switchable traction control. So all of that is not new, but the way this makes power, this just makes it feel that much more lively, and that's great because the chassis is also that much more lively. So again, the harmony between the engine and the chassis is great, and the fact that Triumph have actually made changes to the engine and just not plonked it from the Speed 400 as is a very good thing. The exhaust sounds very nice as well. It looks very nice as well, and small details like when you look at the exhaust from behind, you see a nice mesh plate and not just black goop that you would see otherwise. It's very nice. So all in all, the engine is also more potent to go with that aggressive chassis setup, and that's a good job. 2.74 lakh rupees ex-showroom. That's how much of your money Triumph is asking for getting one of these Triumph Thruxton 400s. Now, is that money well spent? I feel like that is a resounding yes, because Triumph has not done just a fake over-the-top cosmetic job to this motorcycle. It's not just a body kit, it's proper work done to the chassis, to the engine, to the ergonomics, all of which contribute to a bike that is much more lively and has a proper character and personality of its own shown outside of the Speed 400. The engine with the extra power, the chassis with the extra ability that it has in terms of being a better corner carver, all of it tying very well together to make sure that this bike lives up to that Thruxton badge. And I feel like this bike does that very well, while striking a very good balance in making it a very usable daily bike as well, with the nice plush suspension setup and all of that. Even the ergos, they aren't too committed that you're going to be needing a chiropractic appointment every other week. So all in all, I feel Triumph have really nailed the brief with this motorcycle, and at 2.74 lakh ex-showroom, this is even more affordable than the Scrambler 400 XC. So this is a lot of bike for the money, and this is something you definitely won't regret buying if cafe racers are your thing. That's what I think about the Triumph Thruxton 400. What do you think about it? Let me know in the comment section down below. Let's have a conversation, and as always, thank you for watching.